And welcome to SportsCage here for another exciting edition. And we've got a great show tonight. SportsCage, as you just heard, brought to you by Regina Motor Products. Great tires and tremendous General Motors vehicles. I'm filling in for Barney today. He's back tomorrow and Friday. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Gerry Johansson, the president and CEO of the Sports Corporation, will join us to talk about one main topic, the NCAA/CHL issue. Dave Thomas, the voice of the Roughriders, at 3:30. He was at practice today. He'll give us the latest on what's going with the Roughriders. Some good news on the injury front. Kevin Seen is a rider Railbird, and we're going to explain what that means and what he does at about 4:05. The voice of the Regina Pats, 4:15, Dante de Caria, and Farhan Lalji of TSN. We're going to talk a lot about the BC Lions. Should they be the favorites to beat the Roughriders on Saturday night in Vancouver? Well, that's a good question. The dean of the business school at the University of Saskatchewan and our CFL analytics guru, Keith Willoughby, will join us at 5:05. Well, one of the top player agents in the sport of hockey, Gerry Johansson of the Sports Corporation, or TSC, he was born in Swift Current. He played one season for the Broncos in 83-84. They were in the SHL in those days. Then 2 seasons for the Western Hockey League's New Westminster Bruins. He was 6'3", 210, so he contributed 47 points and 464 penalty minutes. The good news is he was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. Who can beat that? He was an assistant coach for the Tri-City Americans for 3 seasons. Now, of course, he's the president and CEO of the Sports Corporation, representing hockey players from all over the globe, all of North America, all over Europe. There's a long list of star hockey players under his umbrella. One of my favorites, of course, are retired now, Carey Price of the Montreal Canadiens. Others, just to name a few, in alphabetical order, Sebastian Aho of the Carolina Hurricanes, Joel Armia of the LA Kings. Man, I thought Gerry and his group did a great job with that contract. Habs, Kirby Dach, we hope he can win that second center position in Montreal. Hayden Fleury of the Winnipeg Jets. Brendan Gallagher from Montreal. Aiden Hill, the goalie in Vegas. Seth Jarvis from Carolina. Tanner Jeannot, the pride of Estevan. Of course, a former Warrior, got a great 5-year deal with Boston. Some people thought it was one of the best deals any player got in free agency. Josh Morrissey of the Jets, former Moose Jaw Warrior. Braden Point for Tampa Bay. Former Pat Sam Steele of the Dallas Stars. Well, the list goes on and on. Gerry's very successful. So, Gerry, welcome to the SportsCage. How did you, I guess you could say, how did you go from being an assistant coach in Tri-City to being the president and CEO of such a huge enterprise?
That's a good question, Don. Plus, good intro. That was impressive. Holy cow. Yeah, you know what it was? I just stopped playing. I was injured. I started coaching and just knew a lot about the Western Hockey League. I was signing contracts and recruiting players. And I was introduced to a fellow named Winter. So Rich founded this company, and he was one of the first guys to bring over Eastern Europeans. So, Frank Musel, I think he brought over from Yugoslavia, of all places at the time, and Dominik Hasek and Chara and Peter Bondra. But he didn't really know anything about Western hot Canadian players. And I knew everything about Western Canadian players and nothing about the agency business. So, hey, it all worked out.
Well, that's great. I mean, you've been so successful. Now, I wanted you on today if we could get you, and we did get you because of NIL. In the NCAA, of course, image and likeness, as long as and as well as your name. Of course, the big news: former Medicine Hat Tiger phenom Gavin McKenna goes to Penn State NCAA. Now, it was reported, Gerry, for about $750,000 US. Is that accurate?
I honestly don't know, Don. I know that there is NIL money. That's a big number, but he's obviously a really good player. But I always hesitate to comment on specifics like that if you don't really know. So, but it's sure
right. Well, I guess what we'll go from there is he an exception? Like you just said, he's going to be the number one pick in the next NHL draft. Is he an exception in terms of the money he's going to get, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. It's a lot of money if it's even close to that. It's a lot of money if it's half that, But the nil money, new thing for hockey. So this is all, I have to tell you, we're all working on this together. Like we've got guys in North Dakota and Penn State. One of our Jackson Smith's, Columbus's first pick this year, he's going to Penn State. And, the coaches have been great, but I really think we're working together to see how this all actually works out. I mean, I think it's going to be fine, but there's a lot of details that, have to get looked after and to make sure we're dotting I's and crossing T's. So this is really, we're on the very, very front edge of this thing. And I think in a couple of years, it'll become more normal. Right. But this sort of happened quickly, and it's happening quickly. So
what was the genesis of this? Was it just the NCAA as a single entity deciding that they're going to allow players from the CHL once they graduate from high school, I guess, to come down? Was it just them, or was there discussions with multi-bodies of the hockey world?
Nope. Just the only thing preventing players from doing this in the past was the NCAA would deem you ineligible if you had a Western Hockey League contract. So even if you signed at like 14 or 15, you could be ineligible. If you played even a few games, you were for sure ineligible. Mm-hmm. So they just changed that rule, and the dominoes are starting to fall.
Now, just in the last draft, the one a month or so ago, 32 players, of course, selected. I counted 8 going to the NCAA directly once they qualify for their education, that is, 4 Americans, 4 Canadians. Is that sort of number changed at all from past drafts, or a few more committing to the NCAA versus the CHL, or is it about the same?
Generally, I would say that you're going to probably find more players drafted out of the CHL, because most of the kids, this is with the exception of a late birthday or an early high school graduation, most players are graduating high school after their draft, or right in their draft year. So I think one of the byproducts, more kids will come to the Western Hockey League or the CHL early, as opposed to, because they don't have to worry about their eligibility. So you might see more kids drafted out of the Western Hockey League. The problem will be more good players might leave early and go to school.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. So for small market CHL teams, and of course there's a lot of them across the country in all 3 leagues, they'll maybe this is only going to be in this one case for Medicine Hat, but they get a pretty good finder's fee for a first-round draft pick from the NHL. And, if you go to, this situation in Medicine Hat with McKenna, he's going to be drafted out of Penn State, not Medicine Hat. So would Penn State get all the finder's fee from the NHL, which is really the lifeblood in some cases for very small CHL franchises?
Yeah, I'm not. That's a good question. I'm not sure that NCAA teams get development money. I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't think I could be wrong. Someone will call in and correct me if I'm wrong. But I do think, in Europe, the money for development flows down to several teams. So if you're split it amongst teams, I think one of the things that's going to happen is the CHL is going to have to renegotiate or at least have a better deal or a different deal with the NHL in terms of development money, because they should get some, if not all of it, if they're putting in that kind of work.
Are there any players that are delaying signing a contract right now, some of your younger clients signing an NHL contract right now because of the fact that if you take any money from the NHL, you disqualify yourself from the NCAA? So some people just saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to do anything right now going into the CHL?
Well, you know what it is? Generally, it was interesting. So we had 3 first-round draft picks. So Braden
Congratulations.
Coots from here, he went to Seattle. He loved Seattle. He wasn't going to go to the NCAA. Cole Reshney and Jackson Smith. Cole Reshney went to North Dakota. Jackson to Penn State. But the teams were aware of all this when this was happening. So, I think in terms of if the team, is supportive of a player going to college, they're going to obviously let them play at least 1 year before we get into contract negotiations. But there could be a situation where a team offers a player a contract and he has to decide between signing it now and returning to the Western League or deferring that opportunity a year and playing in college. So your point is well made that is going to be an issue at some point for somebody.
I guess the good news about this is, you know, when you're first starting your career and you're deciding what you're going to do, it's not necessarily for life. Like if you commit to the CHL now as a very young individual, maybe 15 years old or whatever, you might have other options in the prior. I mean, that was where you're going to go for the rest of your junior career. Is that sort of a good thing that you're not sort of pigeonholed for some of your clients that way?
Well, yeah, because forever, we were talking to kids that were 15 years old about not committing to a Western League team if they wanted to go to school. That's pretty young for a player and a family to make a decision like that. So it was always difficult. And the Western League offers you things right away, like you're signing a contract, you're probably getting a jersey, you might get some games in. So it was really difficult to say no to that. Now I think most players are going to go to the Western League or the CHL because really there's no risk, And the other thing I'll tell you, Don, is early on in this process, we had a lot of U Sport players getting offers. That was really the first wave. So we had there's probably 3 or 4 U of A guys. Trevor Wong on U of S is one of our players, and he's going to Nebraska Omaha. So it started out as the older graduated players, and now it's moving its way down a little bit to the younger guys. Well,
that's really interesting. So how much do you think this could affect the Junior A and U sports?
Well, it's funny. It's sort of like it affects everybody, right? It's like a ripple effect. But I know the U Sports are changing their eligibility rules themselves. So they're allowing players that have played in minor pro more flexibility to come back to U Sport, And I mean, the Junior A's leagues, it's different. I mean, the BCHL sort of changed quite a bit a couple of years ago. They were, but I do think that the community, the SJ and the Alberta Junior League, they're going to be fine. It's just going to be it's just going to be a little bit of a different time for a while, and it'll all settle out.
So a lot of players that might have gone to junior, I know there's a lot of teams that have gone older in junior for sure, but I guess there's one situation is when the players. They don't have to go to junior A. Like say they're a strong player, they can go right to the CHL if they want. Is that right? And is the Western Hockey League and the CHL going to become a league, Gerry, of basically 16, 17, and 18-year-olds?
Yeah, well, your first point is correct. That if you're a good player, why wouldn't you go play in the Western Hockey League? It wouldn't make a lot of sense unless you had a different personal reason, And I will say one thing, Don, like this, it'll be interesting to see how many kids that go to the NCAA like it. Because it's different. I played the NCAA in between Swift Current and New West, and it was great, but it's different. You don't play as many games. You got to go to school, and the Western League model is pretty good. So I do think you're going to see a balancing out here. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that all the best players are going to head off to the NCAA.
What's really interesting is, could there be, what players in the United States are noticing, and you made the comment earlier that, CHL is going to do very good in the drafts. Is it possible that more younger players from the United States before they go to college will leave the USHL and come up to the CHL?
I think we've seen that already. Yeah, I think that's already happened. And I think that, if I'm a Western League team, I'm getting a little bit more creative in my recruiting. I'm probably broadening the scope of the players that you're looking for, So, I think that's certainly going to be another piece of it.
Now, I mean, in terms of the CHL teams are already talking about improving sort of their product to entice players to come to the CHL. Is that what you're hearing from different teams in the CHL right now? They want to have, improve their facilities, better nutrition, to try to, to bring up more of these players that maybe wouldn't have come otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a natural. I mean, it's just sort of the natural effect of competition, right?
Hmm.
I mean, the Western League and the CHL really haven't had much competition over these years since I was a kid. So I think there's still good. There's still a good model though. Like most of our players played in the Western Hockey League, and it's a really good development league. Like being on the bus a lot and playing 80, 90 games is a good thing for a lot of our players. Most of the faces on my wall are Western League graduates, so it's not a bad place to play. And the college is different, so you're never going to try and compete directly with college, but you're going to improve your own product to make it better. And I think that's what competition does. It brings out the best. So I can't wait to see how the Western League decides to improve. But I'm still a big fan of the Western League.
Well, like if you take a look at the CHL, of course, 3 different leagues. Do you think this is going to unify the CHL together, make them stronger collectively? I mean, they've already had a few television commercials I've seen during the playoffs talking about the good things in the Western Hockey League, etc.
Yeah, I think, it sort of reminds me when I first started in this business, like the NHL teams kind of ran their own show, and it was sort of, over these years, the NHL itself has become more cohesive. Teams are
Hmm.
still independent and they still have their own personality, but they share so much more common ground now. 30 years ago,
Hmm.
a little bit like the Wild West kind of. And I think hopefully you see that in the CHL where they pull together more and do best practices and they share information and they try to help each other out instead of, if I do it better than you, I'm better than you, right?
Hmm.
Instead of saying we raise the bottom for everybody, it's better for me. If that
Well,
makes sense.
as they raise the bottom, as you said, do you have any concern for smaller cities like the Swift Currents and the Moose Jaws going forward in the CHL, that they won't be able to have all the benefits that some of the larger markets can to try to entice players?
Yeah, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on how much money it's going to cost. I just think it's just trying to do a better job. And like I said, the fabric of the Western League is really the small towns, Swift Current, Moose Jaw, PA,
It is.
right? And so
Hmm.
that's important. And God forbid I brought up revenue sharing. I don't know if they'd ever bite on that one, but not a terrible
Wow.
idea, But they could also, get a better deal from the National Hockey. There's things that they can do to help the group, right? And again, the better your smaller market teams are, the better your league is. So there's got to be a way to do that. It can't be that
Wow.
complicated.
Revenue sharing, that's almost breaking news.
I
Just the
didn't say
idea of
that.
it. No, well, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting idea to see if that could come in place,
Or,
because you're
or,
exactly right about being strong together.
or
Go ahead.
cost sharing. I mean, cost sharing might be a better way to say it. I mean, there's not a lot of big revenue teams in junior hockey. It's all pretty small revenue, to be fair, But I
Hmm.
do think that you can cost share a bit. I think that's there's ways to do that, but just ways
Yeah.
I would say even more, broadly, just to work together to try to help each other become better, as opposed to the old days. It was a little bit like, if you fail, I succeed, right?
Yeah.
If you're bad, that's good for me because I'm good. And the same was like that in the
Yeah.
NHL, and you've seen that change now, where the baseline for all the teams is a lot higher.
So to capsulate all of this, would you say more younger players coming into the CHL that are stronger at a younger age, and less older players in the CHL that more of them may move on to the NCAA? Would you say that's fair to sort of predict, or not?
I think so, and I also think too, the real opportunity, like if you take out the best players, because the best players always have more options anyway. But if you look
Hmm.
at the bulk of the players, I can see it where most players will finish their 19-year-old year and then go to college. Because,
Yeah.
it's still a pretty good league. It's pretty good to play, that much hockey for that long. And then at 20, say you go on to the NCAA and you can sort of go on with your education, and you can have a rebirth of sorts because the NCAA is an older league. So I don't necessarily
Hmm.
think all the best young guys are leaving, but I do think, at some point it's an option for older players. So maybe that's the balance.
A lot of people here in Regina talking about Maddox Schultz, and of course, quite a phenom at this point. I'm sure you agree there, Gerry. And so he's going to be, playing 30 some odd hockey games for the Pats under that new agreement this year. Then he'll be full-time Western Hockey League the following season. And everybody's already saying, will Maddox still be here when he finishes high school? Is that going to sort of hang over some star players in the CHL, do you think?
I think so. It's people are going to talk about it. I can tell you about being in this business for a long time. Every decision that gets made is on a very personal one. Every player and their families have to come to a decision that's right for them. So it's really, every player we've had, as similar as they might look on their trajectory or what they look like on paper, it's very unique, their scenarios. So, I know Maddox Schultz's family, they're wonderful people. They'll make the smart decision at the right time, and who knows what that is.
Yeah, how much is it a big factor, hometowns, because Maddox is from Regina? A lot of your clients, are they usually leaning to hometowns or very close to home, or not necessarily?
I would say, because the Bantam draft's always a good indicator of that one, because, the kids are getting drafted. I'd say over all these years, I'd say 90% of the players will go wherever they're drafted. And there's maybe 10% that have probably a 10% that have a really good reason why they don't want to. And there are some very reasons, sometimes they're family reasons or personal things that are really important but I would say it's pretty close to 90% of our kids over the years have gone where they're drafted.
Now, when you say personal reasons, I guess in your business, you really get to know your clients, don't you? Because they're so varied and they have different feelings and opinions about what they want to do.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, if we're doing our job right, we're basically part of the family. So it's and that's really important information for us when you're giving a young family and a player, advice on their hockey career. It's really personal. I can close up the office and walk out the door, but if you're a hockey player, you can't leave the office because you are the office.
One last question, because he's a bit polarizing, one of your clients in the NHL, as Tanner Jeannot, as a tougher player, a physical player. And like I said, the Sports Corporation did hell of a job with that 5-year deal in Boston. But what's got to get him on this show one of these days. What's Tanner like personally? Because on the ice he's one thing, but what's he like off the ice?
Well, let me tell you, one of the things I'm blessed with is a really good team around me, and our partner in Saskatoon, Michael Kay, has done a great job with Tanner. So he's Tanner's primary agent. He's been working with Tanner all the way along. He negotiated that contract. He did a fantastic job. I know I was getting a lot of calls on Tanner. I just share him with Mike, but he did a super job. Everything I've met Tanner a few times and everything I've heard of him is just I know friends of his, and we have clients who are friends of his, and he's a really, really solid person. So I'm glad he got what he deserved. Well,
he sure gives it his all. There's no doubt about his effort on the ice. Gerry, it's 100%. Been great to have you. You've really filled in a lot of blanks about this whole issue. And I think your main message is, correct me if I'm wrong, is in the end, everything's going to be okay here.
Everything will find its way, as it always does. It'll work out.
Right. Thanks a lot, Gerry. SportsCage continues in just a moment. It's Don Hewitt back with SportsCage, filling in for Barney. Guests like Dave Thomas appear in the Western Pizza Hotline. It's a pizza that's known worldwide for a reason, loaded with toppings of Western Canadian ingredients and always cooked to perfection. And Dave Thomas joins us, the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, on the Western Pizza Hotline. And before we got gabbing about today's practice, Dave, I think you, TSN, and QR77 in Calgary, the three of you, the three broadcasters covering the Friday night Rough Rider game, broke a record for filling time. And how in the heck did you fill that much time? And you did it well.
You know what? It's a credit to the entire Rider Broadcast Network team. We all just dialed up our contacts, and if you had a story and were on the concourse level, odds were you were coming to the SportsCage Lounge to tell us live.
Oh my goodness! You'll never have to do that again. The CFL is already talking about different measures they're going to take. So something that situation wouldn't occur for as long in the future. But so all I know is you've already passed the test. You'll never, I promise you, you'll never have to fill that much time ever again. And I will add this, people pointing fingers of blame here and there about the smoke issues and what happened in front of it. I don't think there's anybody to blame. I think it was a bizarre circumstance where wind was supposed to be coming in and didn't. And there were so many things going on all at the same time. And it ended up being basically a learning experience for everybody involved, don't you think?
Well, what's the old joke? You don't like the weather in Saskatchewan, wait 5 minutes. Well, we can say we waited over 3.5 hours and it didn't happen. But you're right. The blame game is futile. Could things have been done better? Absolutely. And that's what hindsight allows you to do. This is going to make it better moving forward. And, some of those protocols are going to be better communication, like actually telling everyone, here is where the smoke and air quality index is at. And here's what we're seeing. And here's what the wind speed is. So it all comes down to better communication. At the end of it all, never is a long time, so I hope we never have to do anything like that again. But like I say, it is the reality in 2025, and we'll just do the best with the cards we're dealt with.
And that's exactly what you did. I'm going to throw to you, so to speak, now, Dave, and you were at practice today, and you can tell us who you talked to.
Well, I don't know if you had your windows open or not, and maybe, just maybe, you went ahead and caught that huge exhale at about 10:45 this morning. That was when Ryder learned that the 3 of the 5 members of the secondary that didn't practice yesterday were back on the field today. And Tavon Campbell was there, fully participating. Marcus Sales there, fully participating. Roland Milligan Jr. Yes, it's a broken record, but they're fully participating. So great news for the Riders secondary, because it did look a little bit scary with the 3 of them watching practice on day number 1. Offensively, I think the big change was that Daniel Johansson took some limited reps, so he's going to be a little bit of a question mark and a wait and see. But the other thing is Tommy Neild is starting to come in. I thought he had a pretty solid camp up in Saskatoon. And again, he was signed to be a guy that could plug into this offense, knowing what it was all about. And of course, with his side speed and athleticism, seemed like a perfect fit. But of course, he got nicked up at the end of training camp and really haven't seen a lot of them, but he was out taking first team reps today, which was good. But we'll start with Coach Mason. Again, Coach was asked about the injuries and some of the things they're facing. And the one that I purposefully haven't talked about was the one that everybody kind of seemed to jump on the bandwagon of at the end of the preseason, that Mario Alford was going to be on his way out. Well, Mario Alford has just provided the second best starting field position out of any team in the Canadian Football League to the Saskatchewan Roughriders thus far this season. But there is some concern going forward as he was nicked up in the loss to Calgary. That was one of many topics that we chatted with head coach Corey Mace about. Well, Coach, Mario Alford went down during the game on Saturday against Calgary, hasn't been out this week. Can you update us on his status at all?
Yeah, he went and got some final imaging yesterday, so we're just waiting on the results. It's probably going to be tough for him to go this week. So, we got Dre's been waiting in the WIMS, an opportunity for him to show who he is.
What does it mean not to potentially have Mario Alford at your disposal?
Yeah, I mean, that's Super Mario, man. That's a tough one to lose. Certainly, he's been playing out of his mind, I thought, to this point in the season. That sucks, but ultimately it sucks for him. But in saying the same thing, we all have confidence in Dre to be able to go out there and execute and make plays, and he showed to be really dangerous in the preseason. So, now he's got guys in front of him blocking for him who've been doing it, for the full season, and we'll just see what that looks like.
Now, you did mention Dre McCray. Was it an easy decision to give Dre an opportunity?
Yeah, I think so, man. I think he proved enough throughout the preseason training camp. I know he's excited, and guys are going to be excited to block for him as well. And, Mario's been nothing but, an extra coach for him as well. So just the family environment, man. He's the next one to go and put his best foot forward.
What did you notice about Dre in camp that gives you confidence in him?
Yeah, just fearless. You got to be. I don't understand it. One, I obviously was never fast enough to do such a thing. But you got a bunch of guys screaming down there trying to take your head off, and sometimes we ask you to run in the teeth of it. So you got to have a little bit of a screw loose, which I think Dre does. And he did just that. He hits the holes fast. It's a lot of space for him, compared to the U.S. game. So, yeah, man, we'll see how it goes.
I guess the other thing we're seeing is that Samuel Emelis is a full participant in all the drills. However, he hasn't been working with the first team offense. Can you update us on his status a bit?
Yeah, no. It depends on what we're doing. He's just gaining confidence back in that. But he's very close. So, I'll end up making that decision after tomorrow's practice. But wouldn't be shocked if he's out there this week. But also if it needs another one, then we'll be smart with it. But yeah, it's definitely where it needs to be.
So that was head coach Corey Mace kind of giving us an update on where the roster is at and what it's looking like for Saturday in BC against the Lions. Now, hold that thought for a second, though, on Samuel Emelis. We'll return to that in just a moment because it seems like week after week after week, he's close, but he just hasn't gotten into the lineup. We'll speak to Samuel Emelis in just a second, but first, let's talk about Dre McCray. Texas Tech grad, again, he's a heck of a receiver, but if you go on YouTube and search Dre McCray, you're going to see some incredible returns that he put on highlight reels across NCAA. And he is a quiet, unspoken, or I guess quiet guy, soft-spoken guy when it comes to being verbal and vocal, but he lets his play speak for him on the field. So I decided to get off the field with Dre McCray and have this conversation with who looks to be the starting punt and kick returner for the Riders come Saturday. Dre, you ready for an opportunity that may fall into your lap this weekend?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm thankful. People have been helping me, bring me along, so I'm excited for the opportunity if it comes.
Some of that help is from Mario Alfred. You can see him talking to you consistently. What is he saying to you?
He just helps me wherever I need, if he has a tip or something, or if I have a question. Sometimes we bounce ideas off each other just to help each other get better, and he's been a really big help and a really good mentor for me.
Has your preparation changed at all this week, knowing that you may get an opportunity?
Not really. Just maybe being more in tune of what the other team is doing and picking Mario's brain a little bit more, hey, what happens if this happens or this? So just being in tune with him a little bit more.
The wide field, we talked about that during training camp. Have you adapted yourself to it and you see all that green out there? Does it seem more comfortable now?
Yeah, it's definitely more comfortable now than it was a few months ago.
Well, the last question I had for you is that coach said you might have a screw loose being a punt returner. Do you have a screw loose in the fact that this is a fun thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it that, but I guess you could say that.
So, okay, maybe not a screw loose, but 5'9", 185 pounds. He can run like the wind, and he loves doing it. So we're going to get a taste of him coming up, Don. But I did promise that we'll talk to Samuel Emelis, and we'll get to that in just a moment, right?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's huge. I'd call it mammoth news that Sam Emelis, as the coach just said to you, is likely to be playing Saturday night in BC because he's a stud. But we're going to hear from that stud in just a moment. SportsCage continues in just a moment. And this is Don Hewitt filling in for Barney. And of course, this is the place you get the best information about rider practice because the best reporter in this marketplace is Dave Thomas. And he's going to tell you exactly what's going on, Dave.
Wow. Well, there's a lot happening today. And there's a lot. You know what? It seems like we've been in that, oh my gosh, who's hurt now mode. You know what I mean? Like that seems to be where we've been at for a while. And today, I was very, very impressed with Peyton Collins. Remember, he started week 1 at left tackle, got shaken up. And I thought was sensational in that game. He was out and taking part today. Now, he wasn't with the first team offense by any stretch of the imagination, but seeing him out there active, participating, that's a huge step forward for him, right? So that was a big one. Samuel Emelis is the other one, right? And the fact that we've been waiting and waiting patiently. And I think that, I don't know that anyone downplayed the injury, but really I think it just lingered longer than anyone ever would have thought. Who would guess that we would ever be at this point in the season? And one of the catchphrases is waiting for things that linger, right? So the win last week and the smoke, and now Samuel Emelis' injury. So he's been back. He wasn't participating with the first team offense today, which is interesting but he was running around, was running routes, taking part in individual drills, doing everything that you would think he would do, except take first-team offensive reps. So I talked to Samuel when he came off the field and had a conversation about where he's at. Well, Samuel, obviously the big question everyone in Rider Nation have is how are you feeling?
I feel good. Obviously, it's progress. It's been progress every week, so we just got to wait and see.
Obviously not ideal for you not to be in the lineup, but what have you seen from the offense thus far in your absence?
Physicality, guys running off fast. Obviously, we come at a loss, so there's things to correct. And I'm pretty sure this week won't do this.
You know, it's been remarkable that seemingly every receiver has an opportunity to step up week after week after week. And I guess maybe seeing that, does that mean that you don't have to rush back with the other guys that are stepping up?
Yeah, I mean, when we got guys like Dante Myers, Keyshawn Johnson, Joe stepping up, big, almost 200 yards, it's easy to make sure I'm back 100%, So, but like I always said, we have a strong group. And everybody can make plays, and we're showing this right now.
Again, it's very clear to see your competitive fire and your competitive nature. Has frustration set in at all that you haven't been able to get back into the lineup?
A little bit, I could say that, but also it's about being smart. Like I said earlier, it's a long season, and you want to make sure you're available for your teammate for the long run.
Regardless whether you're in or out of the lineup, how big is this week's game in terms of a bounce back and the overall West Division picture?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big game. We beat them 3 weeks ago, so obviously it's a big game for them, especially at home, and they're rolling right now. They have a good momentum with 2 aways win in a row. So we just got to be ready and face them.
Dave,
Samuel Emelis.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, definite maybe then when it comes to Samuel Emelis and his participation this week, but it's trending in the right direction.
Let's hope so. Such a fabulous football player. Now, in the last couple of weeks, the last question I'll ask you, Dave, the Riders have only been able to dress 3 defensive tackles. Prior to that, they're rotating 4. I really felt, the game against Calgary that, it's such a fast game and so powerful nowadays that 3 rotating defensive tackles is tough. Now, what's the word on Caleb Sanders? He's been the missing ingredient. They were, dressing 4 when he was healthy. What's the story? Is there any timeline for Caleb coming back?
He can go. He's fully participating in practice right now. He's looked really, really good this week. The only thing that's holding him back, in my mind, is the ratio. Right? Because you're bringing an American on. So where do you take an American off? And really the issue right now is that behind AJ Ouellette, right, you have to have Kadeem Carey because there's no other running backs in camp. And Thomas Bertrand-Houdon is on the 6-game injured list. So that's where I would suggest that's at. But again, you heard Samuel Emelis talk about the importance of this game. I don't think anybody is going to be holding anything back. And what I found interesting last week, Don, and I'm sorry to kind of jump in here, but last week at SportsCage.com, 61% of voters picked the Riders to absolutely hand it to the Calgary Stampeders. So I'm very curious where Rider Nation is at after dropping that one to Calgary, and maybe that's where SaskTel's Pick the Score can come in, because you can light it up on the text line at 306-936-6262. Give us a score. Riders, Stamps, who's going to win, because I'd be very, very curious. And, of course, when it comes to SaskTel, the score, who did I say? The Stamps? I meant BC. So if you want to pick between Calgary and the Riders, I'd suggest going Calgary on that one. But if you want to pick Calgary, BC, I'm very curious where those are coming in on the text line at 306-936-6262.
Well, surely, Dave, that Rider fans aren't fickle, are they?
No, not at all. And the first question I asked Micah Johnson when I saw him this week was, so, hey, Micah, is the sky falling? And he just laughed at me and walked away.
That's right. Great job as usual, Dave. We really appreciate it. Sports Cage continues in just a moment. And for the sports ticker tonight in the Western Canadian Baseball League, the Red Sox at Brooks to play the Bombers. Opening pitch is 7 bells. The Saskatoon Berries in that beautiful ballpark in Okotoks, also opening pitch at 7. There's a doubleheader in Weyburn. The Beavers welcoming the Swift Current 57. So if you've got a few hours you want to enjoy, why not head down to the doubleheader? I think they're pretty much getting close to the first pitch very shortly in a few minutes. And the Medicine Hat Mavericks travel to Moose Jaw to play the Miller Express opening pitch as well at 7 o'clock. The ticker is brought to you by Reliance, Heath Water Heater Rentals, keeping you in hot and soft water. Why not call on Reliance? SportsCage continues in just a moment. And this is Don Hewitt back with SportsCage, filling in for Barney, who will be back in the big chair here on SportsCage tomorrow. Now, Railbirds in Saskatchewan are fans who regularly attend rider practices. It's called Railbirds because when the riders used to practice in the infield at the old exhibition horse track, those fans used to lean on one of the race track rails to watch practice, hence Railbirds. And, one of the best Railbirds in the business is my good friend, Kevin Seen. And he's been a Railbird for a number of years, and he's darn good at it. So, Kevin, how did you start being a Railbird, and why do you enjoy it?
Hey Don, thanks a lot for having me. You know what? I've been a fan of the Riders, honestly, for a number of years. I went to games as a kid with my dad back in the early 70s. I got ticket stubs from games back in the early 70s, and always was a huge Rider fan, and always enjoyed going. Just, you know what? I had a couple opportunities if I was in town and practice was on. Took advantage of that and just, wanted to see who was maybe in the lineup and who was playing, who maybe was coming off an injury list or whatever. But I love doing it. It's, there's always some interesting people there watching. And I know, I see Dave there all the time too, down on the field and whatnot. But yeah, just an enjoyable experience. Something you can do practically every week if the weather's right.
Now, there's sort of a group of you who are regulars. Is there a lot of camaraderie with you folks? After a rider practice, do you go have coffee and talk about it at all and things like that?
Yeah, not so much. The other gentlemen, I've kind of hooked up with them a little bit more lately. James being one, and Len and George and a few. But those guys have got some great insight. They, they're literally sitting there, paying attention to who's in, who's out, who's maybe on the 6th game and eligible to come off and stuff like that. So yeah, just there's a little bit more inside information there, I think, with those guys, because they do have such a great knowledge of the club and just situations with both, the ratio and, if somebody comes on, that's going to be an American starter, we've got to make room for him in a way to get another Canadian on. So yeah, it just, those kinds of things. I just find it interesting to see, what's coming on the next game day and whatnot.
Well, back in my reporting days, what I found and learned was the regular Railbirds, as you say, Kevin, really knew what was going on. One of my favorite Railbirds was actually Walter Betker. Jan of Schmerder curling fame was his daughter. And whenever I showed up at rider practice, I'd always go right over to Walter, who I always thought was the number one Railbird, and say, Walter, what's going on? I'd have a pen and paper. Walter would tell me what's going on, and I just use that for my questions after the practice.
Excellent. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no. There's some great insight there, isn't there, though, Don? I mean, those guys really... they really do follow it, and really it's a huge passion of theirs, honestly. But yeah, there's some great information there, Don, and I'm sure it served you well. Now,
when you're the Railbird, and it's great the riders allow you in there. I don't know if all teams do that, but the riders have always allowed the Railbirds into practice, except for the closed ones. Do you ever chat with any of the players or the coaches? Does Corey Mace ever come by and chat with you guys? Or any interactions like that at all?
Actually, not so much, head coach or anything like that. But I know a couple of weeks ago, Kyle Carson came down and was just chatting to the guys a little bit and just asking them, a few questions. I think he was kind of, one of the gentlemen was sitting there writing down a few things and had a pen and paper out, and he kind of asked, what are you doing here, and exactly, what do you, and he said, hey, you know what, we're just fans, and we're just paying attention to who's in, who's out, and Kyle sat there with us and had a great conversation actually, and really appreciated the loyalty of guys coming out every practice and just watching and taking part for sure.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, there's certain plays you're seeing.
Yes.
That the Riders, I mean, do not want the opposition to see. I mean, it's really quite a matter of trust that the organization has in you, the Railbirds, isn't it?
Well, that's interesting, actually. One of the guys had mentioned that a couple of years ago, when Mr. Jones was running the show, he sat at center field with his arms crossed and was pointing up into the stands and had somebody come up and say, what he was, the gentleman was taking some pictures and some video at the stadium when it was new, and wanted to know what he was doing and just why he would be taking pictures and whatnot. And of course it was just, him enjoying the new stadium and whatnot. But that's kind of, and I get it too. Like, I mean, last week we got to see, both Kadeem Carey and Olette in the backfield, and we kind of had an inkling that chances were pretty good that we would see both those guys in the last game, in the Calgary game, which we did, and possibly looking that way again this week as well.
Now, do some of your friends bug you for Rider information because they know you're a Railbird?
No, not so much. No, I'm not that privileged for sure. But yeah, like I said, it's just nice to keep a pulse on the team a little bit, and I don't know. It's just nice to know maybe what's coming, and it's just a great way to enjoy the day. You can grab lunch and sit out there, and I encourage people to do that too. Yeah. It's a great way to spend a couple hours. Honestly, these guys are professional athletes. A lot of them NFL pedigrees, and I mean, where else do you find that kind of thing up in this part of the world? So we're very fortunate to have it. And like you said before, Don, we're very lucky to be able to access the stadium and go to practice without, any recourse or anything. It's like I said, we're quite lucky to be able to do it, really.
Yeah. And hats off to the organization for allowing it. Now, absolutely. I've gone on record as saying, Kevin, a few times that I'm not the biggest Chris Jones fan, or not really in the past, but
I think we might've talked about that before, Don. Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what I think, mind you, but is it sort of friendlier around there without Chris Jones in charge?
Oh, I think everybody's a little more relaxed, and I won't speak for too many people, but honestly, we're in a good spot now. Jeremy O'Day is really, he's brought a pile of talent to this team, and we are deep in every position. Honestly, I think we're set up for, a couple of pretty good runs here if we can keep the injuries down a little bit. But no, Coach Mace, I don't think we could have hired a better guy for this part of the world. Everybody's armchair quarterback and a GM, and it takes a certain guy to be able to deal with that and make things happen. So no, like I said, I think we're in real good shape here, actually.
Now, being a Railbird is quite time consuming, so your wife's pretty good about it. Hey, Kevin, like she says, that's okay.
She's happy to get me out for a couple hours. I'm good to go, and tie me back in about 1:30, and then it's cut the grass or do whatever else after that. But, and she's actually attended a time or two as well. But again, not for everybody, but you know what? Like I said, if you're, sitting downtown and looking for a place to grab lunch, go grab a sub or a burger or whatever and sit in the stands and enjoy a beautiful day and watch these guys, perform and get ready for their next game.
Well, thanks, Kevin. It's always never, ever a mistake to talk to a Railbird if you want information. We appreciate you coming on the show. SportsCage continues in just a moment. Don Hewitt back with SportsCage at the Provincial Amateur and Mid-Amateur Golf Championships in Humboldt at the Golf Club up in Humboldt. On the women's side, Chloe Wills of Current leads the way at -3 over at the men. Corey Bailey from Swift Current. He's been doing lots of golfing in Swift Current and golfing well because he's at a very impressive -8. The voice of the Regina Pats right here on CFL Radio, Dante Caria, joins us now on SportsCage. And Dante, I don't know if you... Nice hat, by the way. What is that hat?
That's my baseball team. That is the U13 Regina Wolfpack.
Oh, nice. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, I don't know, at 3:05, did you hear Gerry Johansson at all?
I watched it,
player
yeah.
agent. Now, he said, in a nutshell, everything's going to be fine. He feels for the Western Hockey League and the CHL. Don't panic. You're still going to see good hockey. I mean, that's generally what he said. You might see stronger, younger players and a few older ones that go, but the product he felt is going to be strong. Is that what you believe as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a much younger league, at least this season, until maybe they can find some sort of agreement with the NCAA and the NHL that I think has the best interest in terms of developing the players for the National Hockey League. I look at baseball as a prime example. Now, we just saw the MLB draft a couple of days ago. Players could either go to college, they can get drafted at a high school, and then go straight to the pros. And then you have to essentially beat various different levels in order to make it to the major leagues.
Good point.
Now, hockey, I think the one problem that we're in right now is that it's such a revenue gate-driven sport at all levels that a lot of these amateur teams in the CHL, at the NCAA level, and even at the junior A level, are all fighting for the same crop of players. To me, I feel at times that we're not really putting in the best interest of the players as far as their development and what the right path is for them. I truly believe that the CHL is the best path in terms of the schedule, the competition, the grittiness, especially in the WHL, the physicality. I think certain types of players get built and prepared for the NHL and for the pro level differently than in other leagues. In particular, at the NCAA level, they don't play as many games, but they have other things they can potentially offer players when it comes to skills and more practices. But I think it's going to be a younger league. It was already a young league. I don't know what they'll do in the 20-year-old situation. It's interesting. I did listen to that interview, and I had mixed feelings on it for sure.
Now, that's interesting you mentioned 20-year-olds because I think the CHL and the Western Hockey League is going to get actually stronger, overall younger players. But then we'll see how long they last if they do go to the NCAA when they get a little older and graduate from high school. But because of that, the end side of it, do you think the Western Hockey League or the CHL will add a 20-year-old or two?
Yeah, I think Penticton's allowed to carry 4 20-year-olds this year because it's their inaugural season, and I assume that Chilliwack's going to be allowed to carry 4 20-year-olds next year as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they go to 4, and I don't have anything to back this up, right, Don? But I wouldn't be surprised if they go across the board 4 20-year-olds just to maybe have some older players in your lineup. For example, when I was working at the junior A level, you would have some 20-year-old players get committed to an NCAA Division I or Division III program or even go CIS after their 20-year-old season because of late development or, say, a program that they were already committed to at 18, 19 years old, brought in some different recruits one season and maybe didn't have room on their roster in terms of ice time for a particular season. He still had junior eligibility, and so he went back and played in the BCHL, for example, when I was working in Powell River for one more season. You do have those different scenarios, and that's a couple of things that I'm sure will pop up in the next couple of years. You look at Mazin Leslie, who has agreed to not go to Bowling Green University this year and play for the Kelowna Rockets, a team that acquired his rights from the Vancouver Giants a couple of months ago. That's nice to see because you never want to see a team that's going for a league championship trade assets for a player and then him not report. That's awful. You never want to see that. The one thing that worries me the most at the CHL level, and in particular at the WHL level, because we're drafting players a year younger than, say, the OHL does, is, like, to me, is how important will those draft picks be, right? When you're acquiring those players. Look at Victoria, Reshny, Verhoff. Those players are leaving. They just drafted them. They never even gave themselves a window that they projected that they would have to win with those young players because of this new NCAA type thing. So I don't. That's what worries the most, is that teams like Alan Miller used to preach all the time, focus so much on the draft and development model, Don. Well, is that still going to be the case? Are you going to have to try to recruit players from the United States instead? I think we're seeing that right now.
Yeah.
They've now added 3 Europeans to try to help, I guess, change things a bit. But those European players can go play NCAA hockey as well. It's I don't know. It's tough to say.
Yeah, well, like what you said, there apparently there's more United States Hockey League players that are younger looking at the CHL than before. Just talking about younger players, you hit the jackpot, Dante, because you got Connor Bedard as a young player coming into the Pats, and now you've got Maddox Schultz to call. That's sort of cool. You're going to have two, extremely phenomenal hockey players to call the action for.
And from what I understand, 2 really great people. I shouldn't say from what I understand. From what I know, I've had a good amount of interactions working with Maddox in the last couple of months. Connor, I consider a good friend of mine, somebody that I still keep in touch with to this day, 4 years after I met him here in Regina. In fact, he actually turns 20 years old tomorrow. Crazy to think that I met Connor at age 16 and now he's turning 20 tomorrow. And I do think that he's going to have a really good season as a 20-year-old in the NHL. A lot of people have written him off, but I mean, this is a guy who's well over half a point per game already as a teenager. And it's funny that you mentioned him. I was looking at Nathan McKinnon's stats when he was 19 as a sophomore in the NHL. He only had 33 points. Well, Connor had over 60 points this season, over 60 last year. Not too bad. As far as Maddox goes, 2 different types of players for fans that are wondering what type of a player he will be with the Regina Pats. He's a 2-way player. He kind of is maybe compared to Jonathan Toews, who in his own right was a great leader, great captain, won 3 Stanley Cups with the Chicago Blackhawks. I think Maddox is going to be a great junior. I think Liam Pugh is going to be a really good junior as well, really good pro. He has size, skill, the ability to shoot the puck. From what I saw from both of those 2 kids and from all the prospects at Spring Development Camp in May, I was very impressed.
Now, just to wrap up here, Dante, you're coaching a baseball team, as we see. Tell us about your team and what's going on with that club.
Yeah, Don, I had to wear my Wolfpack hat. That's my team hat. I'm not wearing the uniform right now. I just had the hat in my office, so I had to give a little bit of a shout out to the kids. League playoffs start this weekend, and then we have our Saskatchewan Provincials next weekend in Regina at Lions Park, which is run by the lovely Leo McDonald. So, regular season just finished up on Saturday. This is my 3rd year coaching. Last year, I was honored to be the Saskatchewan Baseball Grassroots Coach of the Year by Baseball Canada.
Congratulations.
And,
wow.
Thank you. Really looking forward to see what this group can do. Most of my kids are first-year kids. I don't have a veteran group, so I've really had to teach them, my style of baseball. We play a lot of small ball. I think I'm the only team that bunts. We bunt. We do little things. We've got practice tonight, practice tomorrow. Play against Esterhazy on Friday. We'll play Assiniboia Saturday, number 1 ranked team, and then we'll play White City Saturday night. So really looking forward to the final 2 weeks of baseball season.
Now, your boss is going to be the majority owner of the Regina Red Sox come October, Queen City Sports and Entertainment, of course, Gavin and Sean Semple. You better let them know you know lots about baseball, Dante.
Yeah, at the press conference, we had a couple conversations. It was funny. They had sandbats around the press conference just for kind of like aesthetic, type thing. Mm-hmm. And I think Sean picked up the sandbat and he was looking at it. And I said, hey, did you know that Barry Bonds hit all of his record home runs with that bat? And then he told me this big story, how he met Barry Bonds. And I was just like, my eyes opened wide up because I love Barry Bonds. He was one of my favorite players. And I think he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Well, that's a debate for another day. Thanks for joining us, Dante. We really appreciated your input. SportsCage continues in just a moment. And it's Don Hewitt back with SportsCage. Sometimes Farhan is in the Mediterranean. There's other times he's in Boston. Where are you now, Farhan? I think you're in a car, actually.
I am. I'm in a parking lot outside a fitness facility where my daughter and son often train. So son's a little under the weather, but my daughter is there, my 13-year-old. So I'm close by.
Well, you've got your daughter training at a young age, Farhan.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and she's watching my son go through it and do it, and she, she's 13 now, and a year ago she became a basketball and volleyball, and and sees the girls around her that at the older age with the high school that are really into the training, and so she's decided to. So good on her.
Now it's a nice week for the CFL on TSN because I know you're welcoming Milt Stiegel back. That must make everybody feel good.
It does. And listen, before we jump on Milt, I do want to offer, I don't want to say an apology, but a clarification from a post that I had last week to the fans of Saskatchewan, because I know that some of them, I talked about how in the game against Calgary jumped out to a lead, and I said there wasn't necessarily a big crowd there to help energize the Riders back into it. Now, that wasn't a criticism at all. It was just observation, because obviously the fans in Regina had been through a lot with what happened with the cancellation or the postponement on Friday, given the conditions in town and the air quality and everything like that. So believe me, that was not a statement with any sort of judgment, malice, criticism, none of it. It was just an observation, which was accurate. But as the guy that the air quality and the forest fires and everything here in British Columbia, we're not hit hard by it this year, but for the last decade plus, every summer we deal with it. So I know what the people of Regina are going through. So I'm glad that they were able to get the game in. I'm glad that there's a bit more normalcy in the past week. But if anybody was offended by that, my apologies, because that wasn't the intent. And searching, turning it back to Milt. Milt and I are close. And we talked a lot about his son, as he was growing up and playing sports and going through the recruiting process and what they eventually wound up doing. And, so I certainly feel like I know Chase. I've only met him once. But it's indescribable what their family has gone through. It's so tragic. And, I'm glad we've got our friend back. I'm glad we've got our colleague back.
For sure.
And I'm glad he's taking steps towards kind of getting his life back in kind of the normal way, because this isn't easy for anybody.
What was sort of odd about the game on Saturday with Calgary and Saskatchewan, it was very hot. And I sit on the east side and I was baking with my wife. And everybody moved around the concourse and found some sort of a seat on the west side in the shade. So the west side was pretty much full or very close to it. There's nobody on the TV camera side, the east side. So it actually looked worse than it was because we were packed in there in the shade. So, but I guess the point being there were seats over there, which, so that means that there were empty seats. But anyway, just
for sure. And I know that Toronto goes through that at BMO as well, where the side where there's typically more crowds is not where the cameras are pointed at, but rather coming from. So certainly it made it look bad. But look, at the end of the day, I'm glad they got the game off. I'm glad the air conditions improved, and and it wasn't necessarily the best game by the Riders, but they'll get another chance to get it right in Vancouver this weekend.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. Now, I'll tell you, I'm really impressed with the BC Lion offensive line, particularly in Edmonton. They had a PFF, that's of course the Pro Football Focus Analytics Company, of unit grade of 64.6. Terrell Broxton, Manning, and Schluger all grading really well. These guys are really gelling on that BC offensive line right now, Farhan.
Yeah, and I also think that Buck Pierce had a pretty good sense of how to get the ball out of Nathan's hands early, right? There was a few mismatches and bubbles there that previous opponents have showed against Edmonton, and BC was able to take advantage of the same things. But and I asked that question today at practice, that you've got some youth or some change along the offensive line. Andrew Pearson played at center, and you mentioned Manning as well, who hasn't played a ton. Getting a spot at one of the guards with the injuries that BC's been dealing with, and then you've got an injured quarterback. So you got to do what you can to get the ball out of his hands quickly to protect the offensive line as well as protecting the player. And, it's going to be a lot harder because Saskatchewan, the last time they played BC, dialed up a ton of pressure. They didn't do as much of that against Calgary, but I know that BC is expecting that again this week. So it'll be interesting to see if the offensive line can hold up the same way against Saskatchewan that they did against Edmonton.
Well, Butler had 171 yards rushing in Edmonton. I think he leads the CFL with 475. I thought up in Edmonton it was one of the best games I've ever seen him play. I don't know why the Riders cut him to start with. But anyway, I thought it was one of the best games I've ever seen him play because he was getting hit hard. He was getting hit off balance. He was, recovering his balance and keep going. Like that was one hell of a tough running effort by Butler.
It was, and for them to be fully committed to him, especially in the first half, I think he had like 93 yards rushing and 35 yards receiving in the first half, and they, the Lions had youth, especially in the middle of that offensive line, and they ran inside behind those guys. And for Butler, he joked about the fact he probably hasn't had 30 carries in a game since high school, and the Lions didn't dress the backup running back because Xander Horvath was injured. So when they wanted to close out the game and run the ball, they just kept leaning on Butler, and he was able to make it work.
Nathan Rourke, 345 yards passing up in Edmonton. What I saw Nathan doing there was hitting tight windows. That's what he was doing 2 years ago. Do you see the 2 years ago Nathan Rourke starting to emerge?
I think so, and I think everybody's always going to want to compare Nathan to that point in time. And the Lions are a different team without him, right? Like they're 3-1 with Nathan Rourke as their starter, and 0-2 without him, and he makes them all so much better, and they know that. And you're right. He found those tight windows, especially early in the game. BC just wanted to use a lot of quick game and a lot of RPO, and it found some tight spaces, and Nathan was able to identify it quick. And that's the thing he does best, right? Is that Jordan McSimic, the Elks offensive coordinator, calls him a fast blinker. And he gets through his progressions really, really quickly, and he can find it and hit those seams before defenders can react.
I'm going to give you some stats, then you try to explain why the Lions are 3-3. The BC offense leads the CFL with 14 touchdowns. Net offense, 410 yards per game. That also leads the CFL. They have the most first downs in the CFL, 135 yards. You flip over to the defense, they've given up the least net offense of 293.7 yards a game. They rank number one with opponent yardage per play and the number of plays they allow an opponent to make. So you look at that on both sides of the ball and you go, how the heck are they 3-3? Was it just because they didn't have Nathan? Because statistically, they have a really good team if you look just at the stats.
Yeah, it's fair, and sometimes stats can be deceiving. The game against Winnipeg, at Winnipeg, the stats were actually fairly even, but the Lions weren't in that game. And so sometimes you can be fooled by that. But I think the biggest thing for BC is turning the ball over, right? I mean, when you look at those two games where Nathan Rourke wasn't in the game and they turned it over 8 times. And if you go to Saskatchewan and you throw 2 pick sixes, you can't win in that world. Right. So
good point.
When you looked at the defense in that game, I thought they played well enough to win, just like they did in the second game against Winnipeg. But when you're giving opponents short fields, when you're giving them touchdowns with what your offense is doing, you just can't win like that. Right. The stats can be damned in that moment. Right. So as long as they can stop turning the ball over, and even the one turnover they had in this game, the interception by Rourke early in the game, was on a really deep ball and in the Montreal game on a really deep ball that eventually just looks like a punt, right? So they were able to overcome it, and then they were also dealing with a lot of penalties. That didn't happen in the game against Edmonton. They had 3 penalties that they took until late in the third quarter, and then by that point the game was over. So they finished with 10 penalties, but the game had been decided, whereas earlier in the season penalties were deciding games along with the turnovers, and that's slowly changing.
Now, do you think the way they looked in Edmonton was really impressive? Because I thought that was a coin flip game going in, but I was totally wrong. Did that wild and wacky, unbelievable win in Montreal, did it galvanize the Lions as a team, do you think?
I suppose so, right? I mean, I think in that game, a lot of people would look at it and say BC was fortunate because the offensive lineman, Pio Lestage, for Montreal took the penalty on the field goal, which wound up giving BC good field position when they got the ball back in the final seconds. But if you look at that entire game, If BC doesn't take the penalties that they take, BC was the better team, right? So I think for BC to win a game against one of the top teams in the league, right? The Owls are an upper echelon team. And the way they did it, I certainly think that galvanized them to a point, right? And it shows them that if they get out of their own way, that they can play with anybody. But I think there's a lot of teams that feel that way, and I think Saskatchewan's one of them, because when you look at, that last game, they just did some things that were very un-Rider-like in terms of their inability to run the football and, and some of those types of things. So I think there's a lot of teams, BC among them, that believe if they're on, that they can play with anybody, and that's going to make this weekend's game just that much more compelling.
Now, our CFL analytics guru, Keith Willoughby, up at the U of S, he gives home teams 3.5-point additions when he talks about who's going to win a ball game. When he goes through all of his analytics and his computer models, it's 3.5 for the home team. So he'll give that 3.5 to the Lions. We'll be talking to him next, actually. So should the Lions actually, when you consider the last couple of games, should the Lions be the favorites? Because this is a 4-point game, Farhan. This is the classic 4-point game.
If you just base it on last week, I think you probably make the Lions favorites. I'm not sure that you necessarily do, just because of how good Saskatchewan has been all season. I don't expect Trevor Harris to play the first half as inefficiently as he did in the last game. If they turnovers from BC, I mean, Saskatchewan's so good at generating turnovers, but they get turnovers in the first 2 drives by Calgary, and they come away with 3 points and are down 7-3 at the end of the first quarter. I just don't think that'll happen again. So for BC, if they can protect the ball, yeah, they could be favorites. But if not, I just don't think Saskatchewan is going to play the way they did in the last game. And as good as BC was at defending Edmonton's run early, Saskatchewan's an entirely different challenge. So, but somebody just asked me, how is the best team in the league, Calgary, in their mind, 4.5-point underdogs against Winnipeg? Well, Winnipeg is the best home field advantage in the league. They are a different team at home, and now they've got 2 weeks to prepare. So I like Winnipeg's odds of bouncing back and winning that game, because it's just so tough to win in Winnipeg. So home field does matter in this league, and that's why I'm picking every home team to win this week.
Okay, now Keith Willoughby, for Winnipeg, home advantage when he does his predictions, he better move 3.5 up to maybe 4.5, because you're right, they're so tough to win. But would you say, nonetheless, we'll see what happens in Winnipeg, nonetheless, are the Calgary Stampeders the biggest surprise to the positive in that regard in the league? I would think so. I mean, what they've done, I would. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Calgary and Hamilton are the 2 surprises, 2 teams that missed the playoffs last year that are leading their respective divisions. And Calgary, for sure, look, I knew offensively they'd be better with Vernon Adams, right? I just have so much time and respect for VA that part doesn't necessarily surprise me. But, when you look at, you lose Reggie Bagleton, right, who's such an important piece, not just because of how good he is as a player, but just the person he is to that team and to that room.
Right.
I thought that was going to be a challenge. But they're doing it with young guys, Damian Alford, who's just stepping out as a starter for the first time in the last couple of games, and just how good he has been. And then defensively, that's the part that blows me away. You've got 12 new players that weren't starters for them last year. And, here they are doing what they're doing, right? So, and even, Pat Delmonico is the first-time play caller. He's had the offensive coordinator play title before, but he hasn't been the primary play caller. He's doing it now. So, yeah, for all of those reasons, what Calgary is doing, despite the fact that I have so much respect for VA, I'm blown away by it.
I know. Now, on the other side of the coin, I guess to the negative side in the league, Ottawa Redblacks, I mean, is Bob Dice, could he be in any trouble this year as the head coach if he doesn't start winning, or what do you think? Because he's a good guy. He's a good football guy, but you have to win as a head coach.
You do, and, the way the East has gone, certainly it's become all about the West this year, unlike last year where the East really did balance the scales. And, the hard part is it's the way that Ottawa is losing games, right? Because when you look at that game against Hamilton last week, they did so many things right for 3 quarters, really for like 55 minutes. before they let it get away from them. And this team also takes way too many penalties. But the challenge is that they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. They've got 18 guys on the injured list.
Yeah.
And that
right.
makes it difficult, right? And they haven't had their quarterback until last week. And he's not 100% healthy, but he knows they need him, right? So he got back in, much like the Lions with Nathan Rourke. So I'm picking them to win this week at home against Hamilton. As good as the Ticats have been, I think Ottawa's better than their record indicates. And they're due for some breaks right now.
Now, you've seen it, though, yourself, and it's so unfair. How many times I've seen head coaches get fired because their team is riddled with injuries? You can go over decades, and you can name 15 coaches that were injury-riddled and couldn't get the ship going with all the backups and got fired. I guess, sometimes in professional sports, life just isn't fair, is it?
It isn't, and like even in Ottawa prior to that, right? Like Paul Lapalisse is a good friend of mine. And when you look at what his quarterback situation was and how decimated they were by injury, and Jeremiah Masoli, who they had so much banked on, just couldn't stay healthy. Like it's a tough situation, right? Mike Benavides, who's got like a really good winning percentage as a head coach and, the season and a half that he was in BC, but he never had his starting quarterback, Travis Luley. He was always banged up. And so it happens like that. And, you can manage some injuries, but it's difficult to manage that injury at that position, so you tend to be a bit more forgiving when guys are dealing with that. But, I think Ottawa's roster is better on both sides. So we'll see where it goes.
Up to Edmonton with the Elks. I mean, when I looked at what they did in the off season, they bring in the new general manager. They bring in a lot of what I thought were very good free agents. And I remember sitting here in, March or something, and I'm thinking, Edmonton's going to be a lot better. There's no way they're not going to be better. I even liked the Mark Killam hire. I thought he deserved it, that's for sure. Why are they not better? I mean, everybody's sort of blaming the quarterback for it. Is that fair? Or why don't you think they're getting it together better than they are?
Well, there's so much more to it than just Trey, and I do think that he is part of it. He, people will say that he improved for 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and then he had the perfect passer rating, which I thought was a little inflated. There were some fortunate plays that happened there for him. And then this week he puts in one of the worst statistical lines for a quarterback in the history of the game. Like, tell me how many quarterbacks have started a game, played almost all of it, and finished with fewer than 40 yards passing in this league. So if you're a coach, you can't live in that world of inconsistency, but can't run the football. And, I don't think even Trey Ford's biggest supporters would think that him throwing the ball 35 times a game is the right recipe. And that didn't happen in the last game because they couldn't get any first downs, but they got to run the football. The offensive line isn't playing as well as it did last year. And then defensively, you talk about the additions that they've made. Everybody felt they would be better, me among them. And I'm a big J.C. Sherritt fan. And I don't think he's in danger in Edmonton because he's part of the family, right? Like he's an ex-Eskimo, current Elk, whatever you want to call it. He is part of the family, and they want to do well, and they want to do well with people that know what it's like to succeed in Edmonton. So, but at the same time, some of the struggles are pretty elementary structurally on the defensive side of the ball. So they're not necessarily putting themselves in the best position to win. So, does JC need some help or some veteran people around him? Maybe, I don't know. But the defense is underperforming. The run game is underperforming, and Trey Ford is underperforming. So, and you can't judge Trey Ford as a young quarterback anymore. This is year 4. He's had 23 starts. He's 26 years old. Please don't talk to me about the young developing quarterback because he's not that.
Oh, that's right. That's a good point. Now, I just in Edmonton a few weeks ago, and I personally believe if they put a winning football team on the field, the fans are itching there. They're itching. Despite the Oilers, they're itching to come to CFL games and watch the Elks, but they just don't give the fans enough reason to come to Commonwealth because I'm positive they'd be back if the team got their act together. Aren't you? Or
I think they would, but it'll take some time because it's been a lot of time of incompetence, right? Like it's been 4 difficult years coming out of COVID for that franchise, right? So there are some that have checked out, but I'll be honest with you, when I post things, and Twitter's not a real place, but when I post things, the amount of engagement I get on an Edmonton story is quite high, right? Like I do believe that even though people aren't attending, they're interested and they're paying attention. Even like just something as simple as Jake Ceresna saying that his injury is not as serious as first believed. Like there was a lot of engagement there.
Good.
So I do think the fans will come back, but they got to be entertained and they got to give them a reason. And, if they make a decision to change quarterbacks again, it's going to be tough because Cody Fajardo is not their answer for the future. You might give him a better chance to win this season, but he's not their quarterback of the future. So now it's still, it creates that much more uncertainty, and hope and who to cling to, right?
Okay, we started with smoke. Let's end with smoke, Farhan. And apparently, according to some scientists, I smoked an entire cigarette sitting in the stands that whole time on Friday night. But I guess the good news, though, is that from that Friday night experience, and I'm not blaming anybody. It was just the first time it had happened. A lot of different things were going on. Wind was supposed to come in, it didn't. But the good news is the CFL would have learned a lot. It finally happened. You knew it was coming, that a game would be canceled because of smoke, especially on the prairies. It'd be canceled now in Toronto. It's bad down there. But I guess the good news is they're going to learn a lot from this, and I don't think it'll be happening again that people would be sitting around that long.
Yeah, look, it's tough to say. I think they want to do everything possible to get games in, especially when the game hasn't started yet, right? Because they have a different standard for when a game has already started because it's got to be decided within 3 hours. So I think they wanted to try to get it in. What was good is I think the league and the PA worked pretty well together on this. Yeah. And I know people in Saskatchewan are upset because they feel like they weren't communicated with. And I'm not sure what that means. And I say that because there's got to be something to update. Do you know what I mean, right? Like, I think they did a really good job of taking care of those fans and additional tickets and concessions and other things like that. I think they did a lot to acknowledge the people that were there and what everybody had been through. So I give Craig Reynolds a lot of credit for that. And, in terms of communication, like, you're not going to get an update every 15 minutes saying nothing has changed. It's just not the way this stuff works. Like, when there is an update, they provide it. And sometimes it's a while between updates. And that's just the way it was in that situation.
Farhan, you're outstanding as usual with some tremendous information. We appreciate that. SportsCage will continue in just a moment. And it's Don Hewitt back with SportsCage. How many years is it that you're watching the Major League Baseball All-Star Game? And it was a great ending last night, of course. And you're kind of thinking, the Blue Jays will be continuing after this game, darn it. This time, you're quite the reverse. You're excited that the Blue Jays are going to be back. So for the sports sticker, we're going to give you something in the future of a sports sticker. The Blue Jays resume action on Friday night. They're at home against the Giants, and it's going to be exciting for a change to be a Toronto Blue Jay fans. And I guess sports sticker is supposed to be daily, but I went 2 days in advance. Sports sticker brought to you by Extreme Hockey and Sport. Wherever your spring and summer sport is, Extreme Hockey has you covered. SportsCage continues in just a moment. And it's Don Hewitt back with SportsCage, filling in for Barney, who will be back tomorrow. And joining me right now is Keith Willoughby, the Dean of the University of Saskatchewan Business School, Edwards School of Business. And of course, Keith is our guru in analytics. And I was talking, I don't know if you heard me talking earlier, Keith, to Farhan, but I was telling Farhan that about yourself and your analytics, and bragging about how good you are at it, I might add. And I told him that, I told Farhan, I said, that you've got basically a 3.5 point advantage to the home team generally built into your analytics. And then we were talking about how difficult it is to win in Winnipeg because Farhan is calling the Bombers to beat the Stampeders on Friday night because they're so tough to play against at home in Winnipeg. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to have to tell this to Keith. Will Keith move 3.5 point home field advantage up for Winnipeg to 4.5, or does that make any sense at all?
Well, it's a great question, Don, and thanks for Farhan for mentioning that. It's something we've never looked at in the years, in the decade that we've been doing the CFL simulations. The 3.5 points for a home team it's an average. When we looked at a number of years of data
Right.
and calculated that home teams are roughly about 3.5 points in terms of that home field advantage. But let's also recognize that there are distinct advantages at some times for some teams when they play at home. Winnipeg is a classic example right now where they've got that home field advantage. And even think back in Saskatchewan during the glory years of that 2006 to 2013 era. The Riders had a home field advantage. Even during Coach Craig Dickinson's first about 2.5 years as head coach, the Riders were 16-3 at one time at home. So there are times, depending upon the franchise, depending upon the venue, where that home field advantage can be an incredible advantage to any team.
And it makes you almost forget, but it makes you realize Craig Dickinson had a great record his first few years as the head coach of the Roughriders. I got to give you a bit of a shout out because you're an out-of-town Rider season ticket holder, and you stayed in Regina on Friday night as the loyal fan that you are, and went to the game on Saturday. That's commitment, because how many hours total is that away from home for you on the weekend?
Well, Don, now I know what a cricket fan feels like in terms of going to games over multiple days. So it was a 30-hour weekend.
Wow.
30-hour commitment from when we left Saskatoon until when we got back would have been like in the evening on Saturday. Now, again, we were fortunate. We had booked a hotel room earlier in the week. Just thinking that, you never know what's going to happen. It's a late night game, which makes it harder the older I get to drive back on Highway 11 back to Saskatoon. So we were fortunate we had a hotel room, but I tell you, it was a long time sitting at Mosaic Friday evening, and an even worse outcome on Saturday. That was painful to observe in the stands.
Now, the Riders put on the pads their first practice yesterday. The coach meant business for more physicality, less mental bust. But I thought it was good on the coach to do that. Put him in pads, let him go, and set the tone for more physical football, Saturday night in Vancouver.
Excellent point, Don. And again, I think big picture, as any sports fan knows, there are very few franchises in professional football that go perfect. The 48 Calgary Stampeders went 12-0. The New England Patriots, they lost the Super Bowl that year, but they were undefeated in the regular season. So we always know we're going to lose at least once during the year. I think what's frustrating for Rider Nation is how we lost. As the season went on, for the first 4 games, our running game got stronger and stronger. The physicality was there. And then it seemed on Saturday afternoon that we ran into a brick wall known as the Calgary front seven. AJ and Kadeem Carey, the inability to move the ball. Maybe we need that physicality back, because BC will be a very tough match in a very loud, raucous crowd on Saturday evening in Vancouver.
Well, you mentioned the undefeated 1948 Calgary Stampeders. They wore those stripes on their shoulders in 48, and the Stamps have gone way back into their past and put them back on, the stripes on the shoulders. That's why I still advocate very strongly, Keith, that the Riders should be wearing their 1966 Grey Cup uniforms to this day. I still advocate that for anybody that's listening, and I don't think anybody
And again, if we can rub off that 66 magic, I would definitely love that. I think just anything to really try to stem the tide, because I know Rider Nation right now, we're happy that we're 4-1, don't get me wrong, but I think people have seen this movie before for the last couple of seasons, and now we don't want to have any turbulence as we go into the next part of the schedule in 2025.
Well, you did mention this earlier. Over the past 3 seasons, the Riders 10-2 in their first 4 games. After that, for the remainder of the season, they're 11-30-1. So, I mean, I guess we're all hoping as Rider fans that what's happened, over the past 3 seasons isn't going to repeat itself with that sort of numbers.
And I think that's where we're looking, obviously, to Coach Mace to really ensure that the leadership is there from the coaching perspective, but also the leaders who are in the locker room, our veteran players, to stand up and not have this recurrence of the past few seasons where we start off with such an accelerated pace but we just can't maintain the gains for the rest of the season. And it is a gauntlet coming up for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I know we have home games against Edmonton and Hamilton, but we're traveling to British Columbia. We're traveling to Montreal. We're traveling to Calgary. We have a back-to-back against Winnipeg. So it's opportunity now for the Riders to really step up and emerge, because if we end up doing really well over the next 5-6 games, that's going to restore the pride, restore the opportunities of finishing first in the West this year.
Now, in terms of your computer model, you were mentioning the Lions have a 59% chance to defeat Saskatchewan. So obviously the computer was impressed with the Lions in Edmonton, very much so, and not so much the Roughriders, I guess, because that's a pretty high number for a team that's 4-1 versus another club that's 3-3.
Yeah, the computer model does put more emphasis on the most recent games played. So BC, they had the win in Montreal on the road, a tough place to play in, and then the win in Edmonton. That was I've rarely seen a quarterback that efficient as Nathan Rourke. I think back to one of Ron Lancaster's games in the '76 season when we shut out the Edmonton franchise 40-0, and Lancaster was 23 of 27 for 290 yards that day. Rourke looked just as impressive, and so I think that's what the model's picking up. That BC obviously playing at home gives them an advantage. When we beat BC by 19, 2 weeks ago? Again, it seems 3 weeks ago. It seems like a longer time ago, given we've had the bye week. But Rourke wasn't in the lineup, and I think that is the missing ingredient for the Lions right now. They looked incredible on all sides of the ball against the Elks.
Right, and they're 3-1 with Nathan Rourke. You mentioned how you can have some good stats, or a player can play well and you lose. Everybody, forgot about what a tremendous passing game Trevor Harris had. He had the best quarterback efficiency in the CFL for all quarterbacks this past game. He was just on fire in so many categories, and yet nobody even talked about how good he was in that game. They had no running game.
Yeah, true. I'd heard a post-game comment from Trevor, and I thought it was very insightful. He commented about his yards after beatdown, basically the yards that he got in the fourth quarter. And again, it was only a 24-10 game. It was still a 2-possession game, but I think what will really stick in the minds of the Riders is the 2 or 3 times we got down near the Stampeder goal line, faced a third down, and couldn't punch the ball into the end zone.
Yeah, here it is. Nobody talks about it because of the loss and because of the smoke. Harris had a grade of 87.9 on PFF. And of course, that's an analytic. 8 consecutive starts with 70% plus completion rate, tying a CFL record. 425 yards passing, 330-yard plus completions, 118.1 efficiency rating. And I thought, after all of the smoke business and the loss, Trevor Harris must feel like Rodney Dangerfield. The man didn't get any respect for that performance.
I think anyway. The one thing that the Rider Nation, where we can have some consolation, is with Trevor, his quarterback. If he has the time, to throw the ball, he doesn't throw interceptions that much. He doesn't throw incompletions that much. You mentioned his completion percentage. I think where Calgary really had our number on Saturday afternoon was there were times that Trevor didn't have the time, didn't have the opportunity of being able to get to the second or third read in the receiving patterns.
I still think Corey Mace will get a hold of this, but the Roughriders lead the CFL in penalties. They've given up, I believe it's 481 yards. The Rider defense has had 20 penalties called against them this year. They've really got to tighten that up, don't they, Keith, in Vancouver?
They do. I think, again, maybe the result for the Rider penalties is skewed because we only played 5 games, and the Toronto game was a slugfest in more ways than one. I'm surprised to hear that the Riders are leading the league, because I don't know if they still have yet to count the penalties from the BC-Montreal brawl, because that was obviously quite a couple weeks ago that happened. We've had a couple instances, again, where the Riders were playing without that composure. I thought Saturday afternoon's game, the Riders, they were playing within the confines. Vernon Adams picked them apart. And my late father taught me to yes, you cheer for the Riders, but you also tip your cap when the opponent makes a good play. And VA made some incredible throws to Philpott, to Damien Alford. He was finding the open receiver, and even when there was a tight window, VA was putting it right where it needed to be.
Oh, he was. And he was getting like his second, third, sometimes fourth reads completed. I agree with you, though, Keith. Like when I see a spectacular play by an opponent, I'm not happy about it, but I appreciate it because it's great athleticism. I don't just cheer against a great play because it's against the Riders or my favorite team. It's tremendous athletes that are entertaining us, isn't it?
They are, and I think again, Vernon Adams Jr. had a stellar game, and we saw obviously what Nathan Rourke did against Edmonton. I think that's where Rider fans are now looking. You've got a very congested West Division right now.
Yeah.
Maybe for the moment we can discard Edmonton. Who knows how they're going to fare? But I tell you, there are four very deep teams: BC, Calgary, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. In terms of being able, who's going to emerge on top? Because it's each team has its definite strengths and real proficiencies.
Let's get back to your computer model, which I enjoy talking about. Calgary now has a 64% probability, 64 of winning the Grey Cup. Talking about skyrocketing with the computer model.
Yeah, this looks like interest rates in the early 1980s now, where things were skyrocketing overnight. This is, to give people a perspective, 2 weeks ago, the Stampeders had a 3% probability of winning the Grey Cup. Again, they were fresh off the loss against Ottawa in the monsoon, Ottawa's only win this season. But then Calgary faces a very tough Winnipeg team at Calgary and manhandles them. They go to Saskatchewan. They manhandle the Riders at Mosaic. The model is picking up now that Calgary's on this real upsurge of two impressive victories against two impressive opponents.
And the good news is it still picks really quickly here, about 30 seconds left. It still picks Saskatchewan finishing at 12-6 despite it all. So that's actually pretty encouraging.
Yeah, the computer model, again, trust me, I'm not trying to give it any special Rider flavor when it does the analysis. But it still believes in the Greenwood. It still has the Riders now finishing second to Calgary in the West, which will be hosting a playoff game. Again, 12-6, we'll see what happens right now. We're 4-1. We've got some winnable games and some tough games. But as a Rider fan, I'm looking forward to the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting what happens, Saturday night. And I think, knowing Corey Mace, they're going to be ready. They're going to be popping, and they're against a tough opponent. So that'll be very interesting to watch. And I hope to have you next Wednesday when I do Cage again to analyze that. Keith Willoughby, thank you very much. Sports Cage continues in just a moment. And it's Don Hewitt back with the Cage. The sports ticker looks really good if you're a CFL fan. I love the summer schedule in the CFL when you've got one game Thursday night, one game Friday night, one game Saturday night, and one game Sunday night. It's great if you're a CFL fan, and you can really be a good couch potato. Toronto plays in Montreal Thursday night. Of course, Calgary and that big game in Winnipeg goes Friday night. Saturday, we know what's going on in Vancouver with the Roughriders in town. And Sunday, Hamilton plays in Ottawa, and it's a huge game for Ottawa, and Farhan is picking Ottawa to win. Sports Cage continues in just a moment.